people and then get to who in the world could have been that mad that day.
This is a case where our best witness could very well be the victim himself.
It has been 16 years and still no answers.
Police consider her killing a cold case.
Years later, the case is still unsolved.
There are so many cold cases out there just waiting to be solved.
The crime scene ultimately tells the story of the murder.
We want to bring justice to these victims.
Man, this feels like snow weather, girlie.
Can throw snowballs at you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Troy. Rutherford.
Troy, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for inviting us. First time in West Virginia.
Thank you for coming.
Do y'all have very many unsolved murder cases?
Just one.
This is it?
This was really our first homicide, and it
Okay.
kind of caught us off guard. The community at first was, they were scared. Prior to this, a lot of people wouldn't lock their cars. A lot of people would leave their garage doors, things like that open because they felt so safe. It is a tough case, but putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, they can hopefully, be able to take everything and make this work.
You got a place for us to work?
Yeah, right in there.
Mr. Alan Brown.
Hi, Alan Brown. Gary Weaver, nice to meet you.
Jerry? Troy, Rutherford. The guys that I'm going to work with don't have a lot of experience in doing homicides. So the key in this, I think, will be for me to help them maximize the information they can get out of the few witnesses they have.
Why don't you start from the beginning and tell us about your victim?
Well, Kyle Smith, he was single.
So he had no children, he had no wife.
No.
What do you do for a profession?
He used to deliver newspapers at night. We would always see him on midnight shift because he would drive on the wrong side of the road, just handing out the papers.
Right.
If you come up on him, he wouldn't move. You had to go around him.
Even the cops?
Even the cops, yeah.
So why don't you tell us about your case?
In July of 2006, our patrol officers got called for what someone thought was a suicide. They walked in through the front door and they could see blood spatter all over the walls. And we saw our victim laying there on a couch. There was severe trauma to his head and his arms and his chest. The head trauma was extremely brutal. And then they saw a stab wound. So they immediately pulled out of the house and contacted us. When we looked at the house, we didn't find a knife or anything. While we were looking, we did notice sandstone rock. The rock had done some damage, but just looking at it, you could tell this is more damage than what a rock would do. So we started searching everything, and we found this blanket, and they opened it up, and there was the pruning shears.
It was later discovered that the handles to these pruning shears were missing. But the metal piece found wrapped in this blanket matched several of the blunt force trauma wounds that were found all over Kyle's head and body.
When we looked at the house, we saw there was no forced entry. Even though it was a mess, you could tell that, the house hadn't really been ransacked. And we did DNA testing. Everything has come back to our victim. One of the things that was real key to us that we found at the scene was a journal.
The lack of any struggle or forced entry told the police that the suspect had to be someone Kyle knew. So as investigators looked through Kyle's journal, they focused on everyone that he mentioned until they were able to eliminate everyone but two. Okay, y'all want to start working on our suspect board? Carl, KB, Kyle.
His cousin, KB, was the one that originally found the body.
The police believe that Kyle was murdered on the night of Tuesday, July the 11th, but his body wasn't reported until the next morning when it was discovered by his cousin, KB. KB claims he was dropping by to thank Kyle for a birthday card.
KB said that he came and he went in the back door and he saw him laying there. And he left and went about a block away to City Fire Department and said, hey, I think my cousin shot himself.
Shot himself?
Yeah, and he is not being very cooperative with us and hasn't really been since the initial interviews.
Anyone who discovers a murdered victim is almost always a suspect right away. And then maybe they can be cleared. But because KB has refused to talk to police over the years, it's been impossible to establish his alibi and clear him. On the night of the murder, he's not far from the area. The night before the discovery, KB was near the victim's house at a local gas station, where he was having a fight with his son, Carl.
Carl E. Kyle.
and it gets confusing with the names.
Our victim's name was Kyle Smith. He was found deceased by his cousin, KB Kyle, and KB Kyle's son was named Carl Kyle, so you have a lot of K's going on in this case.
The night of the murder, we know that KB met his son, Carl, at a gas station and put gas in Carl's car.
Okay, just 10 minutes from the scene.
He had been at the house.
At the house, July the 8th?
Yeah. When we reviewed the journal, we found out that 3 days before and the night of the murder, Carl spent most of the day over at Kyle's house, and that he had borrowed $150 off of him. Going back through the journal, we found a couple other places where recently he had been over at the house borrowing money. How we originally got onto him is very strange, too. While we were processing the crime scene, we noticed Carl just walking around the parking lot. He said, "I'm looking for my dad." We said, "Who's your dad?" And he said, "KB." Someone had told him that, and we had talked with KB. We asked him, "What were you doing last night?" And he goes, "I have a witness."
Just like that?
Yeah, doesn't ask anything at all about what we're doing there, what has happened, or anything.
Generally, when family members come back to a crime scene and they realize someone they love has been murdered, they're freaking out. They're crying, they're asking questions, they're not believing it. And Carl Kyle acted in none of those ways, which is very unusual.
We said, "What were you doing?" He said, "I was at home with my girlfriend all night." He said, "I need to know where my dad is." And that's all he worried about was his dad.
Both Carl and his dad, KB, showed really strange behavior after the murder. The question is, does the evidence reveal that either of them had any motive to kill Kyle?
The victim's journal is like he's talking from the grave.
Kyle Smith didn't let a lot of people come into his world, but we're going to have to learn everything that we can about him to try and figure out what happened. His nieces, Melinda and Elisa, were close to Kyle throughout his life, and we're excited to talk to them, to listen to stories they have to say about him. They've been thinking about their uncle and wondering what happened to him for the past 8 years. So describe the family for us. Who's what? Starting with your mom and your uncle.
They're brother and sister.
And then there's a cousin.
KB.
Okay.
I think Uncle Kyle and KB were like pretty good
Cousins.
friends.
We grew up, we didn't see KB that much,
No,
but we
didn't.
always heard his name.
Yeah. Uncle Kyle was our favorite. Uncle Kyle was a good man, gentle and kind. He had nothing, but whatever he had, he would share. He did a 100-mile route every night delivering newspaper bundles, and he would stop and pick up box turtles for us kids.
Oh, God, you love that.
And save them.
Not only he was picking them up for us, but he didn't want to run them over.
He was just an easy person to be around. I can still hear his laugh and see his smile. For a man who didn't have anything, he certainly tried to be generous.
He was very generous. If anybody needed anything, he would give it to them.
Yeah. He was the most undeserving person to die like that.
Yeah.
He would not have hurt anybody or anything. And in fact, we could just picture whoever was there, if an argument started up, we could hear him saying, "We don't have to get all in a fuss here, let's just talk this out." He would try to have made peace. Yeah, it was sad to lose him, but to think that that's the way that Uncle Kyle had to go out, that was the hard part.
Pretty unfair for everything he's ever done for everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I had my firstborn son, he said, "Well, Elisa, I don't have much to give for your new son," but he said, "Here's a quarter." And he gave me a quarter. So that was nice. You know, that sounds really stupid, but for somebody that doesn't have anything, you know. He made sure that he gave me something for our new baby. So.
I mean, y'all told some great stories. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Every time you approach a victim's family, you know that you're setting them up to possibly have their heart broken. The pressure and the stress that comes with that is hard to describe, and all you want to do is your very best to try and solve the case. Just keep thinking positive thoughts, and hopefully we can come back with some good news, we hope.
Yeah.
The actual crime scene, Kyle's house, was demolished years ago. That's a huge challenge because we need this space in order to visualize how the murder occurred. So constructing an accurate mock crime scene will be very important. If we're going to catch Kyle's murderer, we have to try to understand what they were thinking.
To figure out what happened to Kyle Smith in 2006, we need to re-examine the crime scene, which presents a challenge for us. The home where Kyle Smith was brutally murdered no longer exists, so Yolanda's put together a mock crime scene.
Hey, good morning.
How about that West Virginia weather? Thank you so much.
It is warming up. It's up to 33 now, so.
So, man,
Come on, guys.
look like a little Eskimo all wrapped up.
Oh my God, what a great idea.
This is our mock crime scene. Everything, I think we all agree, happened just right here on the couch.
Kyle's house was very small, and it seems like he spent most of his time on the sofa in the living room where he was found.
Based on what everyone told us, this was his area. The TV's right there. When we were talking to witnesses, they said that he would write in his journal when the 11 o'clock news would come on. So we were able to say someone showed up at his house 11 to 11:30 time frame because he quit writing in his journal. Someone comes in, I take the journal, put it down, put the pen away.
The journal's on the floor.
In this area.
To me, that would indicate that someone has come in the middle of his writing. He puts his journal away, puts his pen away, and he's in the process of visiting with the suspect. You can rule out a robbery, obviously.
Yeah.
You can tell a lot about a suspect by the murder weapon they used. And in this case, we have three. A rock, which we believe was used to prop open Kyle's front door. A pair of pruning shears he kept near the front door. And a knife, which police believe was kept near the sofa. Because all three murder weapons came from the living room area, it tells us the killer didn't bring a weapon and probably didn't show up planning to kill Kyle.
Help me out.
Okay, I'll be the victim.
So, Mr. Smith is writing in his journal, doing his own thing. Person comes to visit him.
Put my pen in my pocket, and I probably set my journal down right here.
Whoever comes to see him becomes very upset. I think this person leaves in anger, but as they're leaving, instead, picks up the rock that Mr. Smith used to prop open his door to get air through his house and just comes back and just starts attacking him with this rock. He's getting defensive wounds on his arms. The rock literally crumbles into 5 pieces.
My theory is the rock was used first due to the fact that the pieces of rock don't have a lot of blood on them. They also don't have fingerprints, which isn't surprising given the porous surface of the sandstone.
So our suspect then picks up a pair of pruners.
The pruning shears were something that Kyle left right in his living room in order to be able to just go out to his yard and do his pruning.
So he grabs the shears and then started beating him. The medical examiner said that he had at least 20 strikes, mainly to the left side in this area of his head. So now we've got an awful lot of blood spraying all over these walls. But now what happens, the shears break away from the handle. Now this weapon's no longer any good.
There was a table, and there's where he kept his knife.
So the suspect grabs that knife, stabs Mr. Smith 1 time in the left side of the abdomen.
And that was it.
So he basically is a very inefficient murderer. He had to get to weapon 3 to do the job with 1 stick.
Yeah. The knife is missing, so our suspect takes that. The handles to the shears are missing. You're talking about somebody who was actually logically thinking for a second.
I've done this. I gotta get away with this.
And he goes into damage control.
Whoever did this left no DNA behind and was smart enough to take the shear handles and knife, which might have had their fingerprints on them. But the crime scene still points to an unprepared and inexperienced killer who murdered suddenly when a conversation got out of hand.
What happened in that conversation that outraged this person so much to do such an overkill on this man?
We know that both suspects, the victim's cousin KB and his son Carl, frequented Kyle's home on a regular basis. But when it comes to motive, The crime scene tells us the question isn't as much who wanted Kyle dead, it's who couldn't stop themselves from killing him.
Who are we going to go see first?
I'm going to try Billy Corbin and Kerry Kaufman.
They were friends of Kyle Smith.
Yeah, they were over his house quite a bit.
It's time to start interviewing witnesses, beginning with the people that Kyle mentioned in his journal.
Did Kyle ever talk to you about KB borrowing money from him?
He's loaned me money, but I don't know if he ever loaned any money out to anybody else.
Okay. Kyle ever talk to you about KB's son borrowing money from him or complaining at all about him mooching around or anything like that?
I never brought that guy up.
Unfortunately, so far, we're not having much luck.
Yeah.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm looking for Mr. John Black.
Right here.
We're taking a look into Kyle Smith's murder back in 2006.
I don't know nothing about it.
If you would.
Not a thing. All I know is what was read in the paper.
Do you know KB?
I know him.
Did KB ever mention to y'all that before the murder happened, he had gotten into an argument with his son?
No, never did.
We know that on the night of the murder, both Carl and KB were reportedly at an Exxon nearby arguing.
But they was having a lot of problems over money.
How do you know that?
Because he was complaining about it. I guess he had lent his son some money. He wasn't quiet about it, he talked about it every day. Which did sound like a broken record, because every day he come down there, about his son,
Did you notice that after the victim was killed, KB didn't talk about it so much anymore?
Yeah, it kind of changed his attitude about talking about it.
About Carl?
Yeah, about his son.
So why would KB stop talking about these financial problems in regards to his son right after the murder? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Black.
Alrighty.
Kyle didn't have a lot of money as far as we know, but it still makes you wonder, could these money problems have some connection to the murder?
Hello.
Sutton, this is Detective Ruthford from the Bridgeport Police Department. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
Our victim, Kyle Smith, was close with much of his family, especially his nephew, Sutton.
What can you tell me about Kyle Smith? What was he like? What kind of person was he?
He was our favorite uncle. He was a good-hearted individual. He liked history, and he could tell good stories, and good-humored, liked to laugh.
What can you tell me about what you remember from the time, when he was killed?
There was a church service. I was one of a few that stood up and, said something about Uncle Kyle, and right behind me was KB's son. And there was something that just struck me right then and there. He was stretched out. He had both hands behind his head. He had his legs stretched out in a smug, superior, and he had a grin on his face that was inappropriate. And I thought, that's odd. And then the next thing that seemed odd to me, KB made some nervous excuse like she couldn't go to Menard's Spaghetti House after the church service. KB and Kyle were good friends. They were close cousins. And I thought that's very odd that he would not come.
It doesn't seem like KB had a reason to kill Kyle, but that doesn't mean he's told police everything he knows about the crime. He's been uncooperative for years. As a prosecutor, though, I've seen a lot of cases where a parent suspects their child's guilt, but they'll do anything they can to cover it up, and that's just natural. You've been very, very helpful, and thank you very much for all your information.
Thank you.
Looking through Kyle's journal, it was apparent that KB visited Kyle a lot. They hung out, KB gave him rides, they exchanged birthday cards, they were really close. There's no obvious strain in their relationship at all.
Here's the notes on him. You can have these to look at.
Carl, on the other hand, never appears in Kyle's journal that whole calendar year until he suddenly starts to visit in the month before the murder. And all three of those times was to borrow money. Why did he suddenly need that money?
She's going to have all of her kids home. Our suspect's children. Michelle is Carl's ex-wife. They were divorced about a year before the murder. She's been cooperative in the past, but she's still the mother of Carl's children, so we're not sure how she's going to react.
What can you tell me about Carl?
After he and I got divorced, he was still in the kids' life for a while, and then I think his life went downhill. He started not really paying as much attention to his kids. My kids haven't seen their dad for probably 8 years now.
You're kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. But Carl, from what I understood, there was drugs, alcohol, and gambling involved in it heavily.
What happened to his chiropractor practice?
His old one, he let it run to the ground. He didn't want to work. He would not have his office open. He was always not able to pay his rent there. He wasn't able to pay his student loans, and he ended up losing that practice. So
how much did that put him in debt to declare in bankruptcy part?
I don't know, but they took $40,000 for the proceeds of the house to pay off his to satisfy that loan.
About how much was he in debt for student loans?
It's probably around $150, maybe.
Okay.
$160,000. The day that Kyle died or was killed was 2 days after Carl was notified that he owed me $15,000.
This is the child support back payment?
He called me and started screaming at me, telling me, why did I do that to him? I was messing up his life.
Did he have temper problems?
Explosive. He would be completely even killed, and then as soon as something would trip him up, or the kids would spill something or do whatever, he would just like turn on a dime and would start screaming and yelling and throwing stuff. And
so the idea of him just losing it all of a sudden wouldn't surprise you?
No, honestly, I didn't even flinch or think twice about it when they called and told me that he was the lead suspect. I told him even after all this happened, I don't know how he looks at himself in the mirror to go to bed at night, and he started laughing, and he said, you know me, I can always go to sleep.
It's not hard to imagine a situation where Carl is desperate, where he had to borrow $50 here and $150 there just to get by. Then he gets hit with the child support right before the murder. He goes to Kyle and asks for money, and Kyle says no, and with that temper, who knows what happened.
No problem.
Thank you, ma'am.
She was way better than I thought she was going to be.
She was great. You're going to learn this, young detective. Ladies remember things way better than men, all right?
Hey, we're here with Alan and Kelly and Yolanda. They're going to ask you some questions first and just go from there, okay?
Okay.
When you have a murder as brutal as Kyle Smith's, it's reasonable to assume that the killer left the scene with blood on them. And that means they could have left traces of that blood in their getaway vehicle. When inspected in 2006, Carl's white Oldsmobile turned up nothing. But when investigators learned that occasionally Carl would drive his then-girlfriend Missy's maroon vehicle, they checked out that car and discovered something strange.
If you're standing there looking at that car, tell us the difference between how the driver's seat looked compared to the rest of the car seats.
The entire inside of this car was filthy. And dirt in the carpet and dirt on all of the seats, front and rear, garbage in the car. The only seat that was clean was the driver's seat. It was freshly clean, like it had been done in just a matter of days.
Oh my God, that's huge.
Police were unable to locate any blood or determine how the seat had been cleaned. And both Missy and Carl denied any knowledge of the car seat being cleaned at all. According to Carl, he had driven only his white car that month. But Carl's coworker reported that they had seen him in the maroon car the day after the murder.
Is Carl distancing himself from the red car because he's afraid it has blood in it, or did he really, really drive the white car? So the focus today is to try and figure out which car he really used.
Now, Kimberly was the one that saw the car there first that morning.
When she got there, he was there early that day, and she actually asked him, is that your maroon car? How many cars do you have?
Kim lives in a whole other state 2 hours away, and I'm worried she's not going to remember something as simple as what color car Carl drove that day. But if she does, it'll definitely make it worth the trip.
So the first question out of the barrel here is when you pull in and you see that burgundy car in the parking lot, is he in it?
He was just getting out, if I can recall right, because we all walked in together.
Okay.
So he was there. I don't know how long before I got there.
But he was already in the parking lot in that car. And so that struck you odd?
Yeah, because like I said, he was always coming in late. Like he was always straggling.
In your statement, you say that Kyle had driven a burgundy vehicle to work on 7/12 of 06 with damage to the front passenger side and West Virginia plates. You got right down to the plates.
It must be because I was younger.
But that car stood out to you because it wasn't the one that you normally saw.
Right.
Shortly after the murder, the detective says it looked like the seat had been cleaned. That makes us wonder if it was cleaned the morning after the murder. It's one of those, you think?
Right there.
After living with Missy and her children for about 2 years, Carl and Missy split soon after the murder.
Missy, hop in the front.
She talked to police several times after the murder, but the answers she gave were always vague and inconsistent. Do you remember what kind of car you were driving back then?
I had an Oldsmobile Alero.
Was it maroon?
Yeah.
And he was driving?
He was driving a white piece of crap.
Okay.
Because he had taken my car to work the day, supposedly, that all this rusted out, and I had the white piece of crap.
And how do you know that?
Because I remember Nina was sick, and I had to take Nina to the doctor up there at East Point, and I remember driving that white piece of crap.
Missy has always been Carl's alibi, and in his written statement, he says on the night of the murder he had dinner with Missy. Then he went to meet his dad at the Exxon, and he was back home in bed with Missy at 11. If Carl said that he came home that night and had dinner with you and the kids...
No, he didn't. He was never there for dinner with me and the kids. I was asleep when he got home. He woke me up.
Do you remember the time?
I'd say he probably came home after midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
The receipt from the Exxon for the gas being put in the car is 10:27 p.m. So we're talking 11:30, a 2-hour gap in there where, am I hearing you right, you have no idea where he is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
This is huge. The 2-hour gap that Missy describes is more than enough time to travel the 11 minutes from the Exxon to Kyle's home, commit the murder, and then travel the 8 minutes to where Carl lived with Missy. Not only that, it's right in the window where we suspect that Kyle was killed sometime around the 11 o'clock news.
I knew when he got home from work that night he didn't have the shirt. Because I asked him, where's that yellow shirt?
So the yellow shirt went missing?
Yeah, I remember him leaving the house in that yellow shirt.
For work that day?
Mm-hmm.
And you never saw the yellow shirt again after the Exxon night?
Not that I remember now, no.
This is the beautiful thing about cold cases. You have somebody like Missy who used to be too scared and too confused at the time of the murder, comes back today thinking clearly. And what she has to say not only undercuts Carl's alibi, it shows how odd Carl was acting when he finally got home that night. I never like to say jackpot with witnesses or evidence because that's being greedy. We'd like to just settle for little nuggets, right?
Yeah.
She was a freaking jackpot. There's little reason to believe that KB had the motive to commit this murder, but he still might know a whole lot more about it.
So we're going to start with him right from the very beginning.
Well, we have to hit him simultaneous with them hitting Carl at 9:15. It's time to approach KB, but to make sure he doesn't tip off Carl, we've decided to split up. Gary, Yolanda, and Alan are going to go after Carl. At the same time, we're joining Detective Brian Kimmerer to confront KB at the McDonald's where he has coffee every morning after church. We're shooting for the one closest to the church first.
Right.
Y'all be careful driving and let us know how it goes as soon as you get through.
All right. So all three of us aren't going into the McDonald's, are we?
Yeah, we are. But I'm just going to stand back and watch y'all. Because y'all look like cops.
Yeah, we
I
do.
don't.
There's a lot of gray-haired men in there. Is that KB right there with his back towards us?
Might be. Last year, our team worked with the Aurora Police Department to investigate the murder of Carolyn Jansen.
It appears to be a human body.
Carolyn's roommate, J.D. Harrington, was charged with that murder. The Arapahoe County DA's office hopes to take that case to trial this year.
Today's the day that we meet with our two suspects, KB Kyle and his son Carl Kyle, about the murder of their cousin Kyle Smith.
Is that KB right there with his back towards us?
Might be.
Kelly is with Troy and Brian at the McDonald's where KB eats breakfast every morning.
One of these doors right here.
And I'm with Alan and Gary, who are about to pay Carl a visit.
Hey, Carl.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Want to see if we could kind of talk with you for a couple minutes?
I really don't know if I can say anything new to you guys that you don't already have. But if you give me a minute, let me use the restroom.
Sure.
I'll contemplate that thought.
Okay.
Hello.
Mr. Kyle,
Yeah.
come outside and talk to me real quick if you want to, so we want to talk in front of all kinds of people. I'm Brian Cameron. Nice to meet you.
What do you do?
I work for the city of Bridgeport.
Take me to jail, buddy.
No, I just wanted to talk to you. I didn't want to interrupt all the social Saturday here.
What's this about?
I think you got a little bit of idea, but I don't want to say everything in front of anybody here. So let's go out here to the car if you don't mind. It'd be better. That way we can figure everything out, all right?
I wouldn't stand right here.
Well, let's go back. We don't want to. It's kind of chilly out here.
I don't have any discussion.
Well, we want to know what you got, what kind of information you do
I
have.
don't have any information about anything.
I understand, sir. I understand.
Hey, I don't want to be bothered with you people.
Mr. Kyle, you don't want to help us figure out what happened to your
We
cousin?
have a job to do, buddy.
Don't you want to help us
You
figure
don't
out?
want to figure out what happened.
Yes, sir, we
Yes,
do.
we do, and we know you know what
He was your
we're talking
cousin and you
about.
cared about him.
Why do you not want to help us solve a murder?
KB is not going to talk to us. He wasn't going to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just hope that Alan and Gary and Yolanda are having a whole lot better luck with Carl.
You guys want a water?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Carl was very apprehensive. You know, he was in the bathroom for an extended period of time. Once he came out, he then said, yeah, he would talk to us.
Tell me about Kyle Smith.
Really didn't have a lot of communications with him.
But right prior to his death, I mean, I know that you'd been over there a couple times as early as the 8th, which was I think Saturday.
Yeah, that was actually the last.
And your reasoning for stopping by, you borrowed some money from him, right?
I borrowed some money from him.
How much altogether did you borrow from him?
$90 or so, because my water was going to be shut off.
Right.
And then I needed to borrow some extra money because of I'd spent some money on some video machines.
Were you gambling a lot back then?
No, I just had one day when I lost. And then I was like, shit, I need a little bit of cash.
And that would be when you went to Kyle on the 8th and
Saturday.
borrowed the 150.
The 150, yes.
Okay.
When police first talked to Carl, he was quick to defend himself and say he had an alibi for the night of the murder. That alibi is that he had dinner with his girlfriend, met his father at an Exxon to get some gas, and then went home to bed.
You'd said in your statement that you called your
I
dad.
called my dad that night because I needed to borrow some gas when I didn't get to work.
And what vehicle do you drive the next day to work?
The late one. Put the gas in.
But Melissa and the lady employee at the chiropractic clinic said you were using a maroon car that morning.
That's not what I remember. I was in a white car
The next day.
the next day.
So, okay, so you go to work the next day and the first person that tells you about his death is going to be Sandra.
Yes.
Okay, what does she tell you?
She says to me, she gets on the phone, she says, I got to tell you that Kyle's dead. The dad found Kyle dead. I said, well, did he have a heart attack?
Right.
And I remember distinctly, she goes, no, something happened to him. I think he was murdered.
Carl has always stated that he first learned of Kyle's death from KB's friend Sandra. But in those statements, he reported that Sandra had said that Kyle had died and may have committed suicide or been killed, but never specifically that he was murdered. Most people remember the moment they learn that a relative is dead, let alone murdered. So why does he keep changing that story?
I drove straight to the scene.
Being Kyle's house.
I was told I need to speak with Detective Lemley.
he says, your cousin was murdered. I said, well, I don't know what else to say. I said, well, I have an alibi. I wasn't here. Being funny.
Without being funny?
No, I'm thinking that I'm thinking that he's asking me these questions and I'm answering as if this is just a joke. If I had realized what was going on, I would have never answered that stupid question with that stupid answer.
But you
know the gravity of the situation because you've already been told he's murdered.
I understand that he's dead, but I don't know why he's asking me these questions.
All right.
That's all I have.
Appreciate you inviting us into your home.
Carl's story's very inconsistent. It doesn't fit. I mean, he's not keeping his story together. He's not keeping everything straight.
Okay, what happened? We're dying to know.
Well, Carl was willing to talk.
He said when he got the call on the 11th from Sandra, he says, I remember, she said, Kyle had been murdered. He said, when I first got to the scene and I talked to the detectives, they asked me where I'd been the night before, and I said, and I was just joking, that I have an alibi.
So now his new explanation is he was joking.
I said, due to the gravity of the whole situation, how could you be joking about it? He goes, I didn't know it was that bad. And I said, well, you just told me that Sandra told you he was murdered.
All right, so is there any reason why y'all want to leave KB on your suspect board?
No.
After everything that we've learned this week, KB might know more, but he does not want to talk to us. So right now, we need to focus on his son, Carl. How do you feel about taking the case to your DA now?
I feel good about it.
You feel good about it, Troy?
You know, I don't understand why we should not take it to the prosecutor.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, get y'all's butts out of here and go ask him. We'll wait in here. The case that Gary and Troy will present to the DA clearly shows that Carl went to Kyle on 3 different occasions in the month before the murder.
I borrowed some money from him.
On the night of the murder, Carl's alibi does not match his girlfriend's statement.
He probably came home after midnight.
And he has an unexplained 2-hour gap close to the time when we think the murder happened. Carl returned home that night without the shirt that he was seen in earlier that day.
I remember him leaving the house in that yellow shirt.
A shirt that was never seen again. On the day after the murder, Carl denied driving the car that witnesses saw him in.
That car stood out to you because it wasn't the one that you normally saw.
A car that made the police suspicious.
The only seat that was clean was the driver's seat. It was partially clean.
Carl was in debt and at the end of his financial rope.
He was always not able to pay his rent there. He wasn't able to pay his student loans.
And between his lies and inconsistencies and his reported ability to snap,
he would just turn on a dime.
It makes you wonder what Carl would have done had he gone to Kyle for money and Kyle said no. You ready? Let's do it. Hi, girls.
Hi, how's it going?
The DA listened to the evidence in the case and gave us an answer, and now it's time to share that news with the family. Today was the day that Gary Weaver and Troy took the case to the DA, and the DA isn't ready to indict yet. He still thinks there's a little left to do, but he has assigned 2 prosecutors to push ahead with the case. So it's all moving forward.
Wow.
It's not an indictment, but having worked in a DA's office, it's a great thing when they're willing to push ahead, and that's what this means. That's a wonderful thing for a case that's been cold for 8 years.
We just thought it went dead, to be honest with you, and I couldn't believe that the Bridgeport Police Department contacted you guys. It blows me away.
Well, Gary Weaver, but you have to give Gary Weaver credit because he put aside his pride to ask for help.
Yeah.
Or we wouldn't be here.
I don't know what to say because we're still all kind of just amazed and overwhelmed and can't believe that this has all happened.
It's been 8 years in coming.
Yeah.
For a sweet, wonderful man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everything you've done.
You're welcome.
Thank you for driving up here and making it easier for our family.
Sure. It's easy to see how Kyle's life touched those around him. His generosity may have brought someone into his life who wanted to do him harm. But that selfless generosity will not be forgotten and will be remembered long after his killer is brought to justice.
Don't miss an all-new Cold Justice next Friday at 8 on TNT.